In the depths of the forest, a boy slowly approaches the body of a dead animal. He doesn't care what happens to him, the main thing is to survive. In the church, the nuns held their breath, watching as the priest handled the magical orb. He addresses someone and, with a firm voice, says that this person is best suited for the profession of a warrior. Then the next one is called. A girl steps forward, and the hero stands behind her. His name is Chris Sparring. The nuns whisper he is one of the twins from a famous family of fighters, and they wonder what fate awaits him. Divine grace in the kingdom of Moldrake is a rite that every resident must undergo when they turn 16. It is then that they learn which job suits them and master all the necessary skills for it. Specialties vary. Some are combat-related, such as warrior, mage, knight. Others are peaceful, like merchant, blacksmith, farmer. And there are advanced ones: mages, holy knights, or magical swordsmen. When a person acquires a prestigious specialty, the state grants certain privileges, so it is considered a major event, but there is one peculiarity. Since childhood, the father prepared Chris to follow in his footsteps, sincerely believed in his son, and persistently taught him many things. The priest calls the hero, and he feels he simply must take the ritual as seriously as possible. The priest says that Chris is best suited for the profession of a farmer, and his special ability is resistance to poisons. The boy was so surprised that his head spun, and all the other residents immediately began to discuss this news lively. The king's twin brother, not believing his ears, exclaims, "Is he really going to become a farmer?" He tries to calm his brother, and the boy calls him by name Klaus. The priest calls the next one, and Klaus approaches him. The nuns quietly whisper that the elder twin is probably worried about his brother's fate. Chris recalls with bitter anger how much time he worked for this day, and as a result, he got such a profession. Suddenly, everyone around begins to whisper and discuss how his brother received the holy sword. After all, this is already the 5th holy sword that appeared since the time of the first hero. All the residents joyfully and sincerely applaud Klaus. The boy's father smiles and praises Klaus, saying that this is exactly the kind of act he hoped for, and also adds that he himself will someday try to become a good head of the family. Chris quietly calls his father, but the father looks at him angrily and with disgust, and the boy trembles with fear. The man angrily scolds his son. "I have taught and cared for you for years, and you became a farmer and treat it completely indifferently." The boy sincerely apologizes, but the father still drives him out of the house. His father calls him a good-for-nothing, and then Chris wanders around the house with a small backpack that's all he can take with him. Yesterday, the whole day the kids mocked him as if he were their punching bag, and everyone in the family laughed at him. Klaus looks at his brother, and with a broken heart, asks why he is leaving without even saying goodbye. Klaus says that he saved the family's reputation for the sake of his brother. With a crazy smile, he began to mock and said in a sarcastic tone that Chris wouldn't even thank him. Chris angrily asks why his brother is laughing at him. Now they had already talked about this before. From birth, Klaus was weak, so his mother and doctors constantly took care of him. When he was 5, he finally recovered and has lived peacefully since, and unlike Chris, his father did not force his son to go through harsh and cruel lessons. Chris was sure that Klaus did not love him either, so there was no point in being friends or expecting anything from anyone. Until now, the brothers had never truly talked to each other. Cloud slapped and asks why his brother still doesn't understand. The boy says that it was his father who abandoned him, and adds that it happened only because Chris was born 10 minutes earlier. Because of this, Chris received all the love and care that the boy himself never knew. Chris feels that his brother might have had his own difficulties too, but still cannot understand why he hates himself so much. He again sees in his memory how their mother was always only with Klaus, and is convinced that only he wants to change something in the past. At that moment, the younger brother loudly laughs at him. Klaus loudly proclaimed that God himself blessed him and gave him a holy sword, then laughs at the fact that his brother became a farmer. Chris loudly and sharply orders him to be silent. But the younger brother suddenly draws his sword and presses it to the king, threatening to kill him. The older brother parries his twin's sword, and Klaus laughs, calling the boy a cute peasant with a flower in his hair, and adds that he dared to go against the sacred sword. He asks attack whenever he wants. Chris suddenly presses the sword to his brother's throat, and he immediately becomes frightened. But the older brother sheathes the sword and thinks, even though he is now a farmer, he was raised more strictly since childhood, so the decision his sword makes will not change. He walks away without stopping, shouting, "This is not the end yet." Chris decisively replies, "Everything is already decided, and he is not going to fight that weakling." The younger brother raises his sword and says he will kill the older one. The latter feels a real threat, turns around fearfully, and sees that a lot of magic has gathered around Klaus. Klaus sharply swings his weapon and loudly shouts the spell, "Holy Strike." The boy looks at the ruins next to Chris, and his heart tightens. It hurts him that he missed. Chris feels with horror. No matter how hard he tries, all his fencing skills are useless when facing a representative of the best profession. Klaus wildly destroys the forest, outraged that his brother has made a fool of him again. He shouts, "Christ, come back." Deep in the forest, Chris, barely breathing, makes his way between the trees and reaches the lake, sits under a tree to catch his breath, and looks at his bruised and swollen leg. He whispers to himself that he managed to escape, but does not know what to do next. The boy remembers his brother's crazy smile and suddenly realizes he really wanted to kill him, so he can no longer stand in Klaus's way. He feels as if someone is already chasing him, so he decides to hide in the forest. Chris opened his bag. Inside were a few pieces of meat. If not for the injury, he would have hunted some animal or monster for food himself, but now that is definitely impossible. The hero bandaged his leg and carefully moved on, intently watching everything around. Pasha had been to the forest many times with his father on hunting trips, but had never gone far inside. Now there were no sounds of animals or even monsters around. Chris found a cave, cleared a little space nearby, and immediately felt relieved. Here he could spend the night without worrying about rain or wind. He says that he just needs to wait a little longer until he gets hungry and his stomach growls. The boy notices an insect nearby and suddenly realizes this is his last chance. Giving this up, he suddenly notices plants with eyes and mouths behind the cave. Suddenly he remembered that he has resistance to poison. Even if he eats something suspicious, he won't die. Before, he hoped this ability would never be needed, but now everything is different. He tears a leaf from a branch and tastes it. At first it seems sweet, but suddenly a bitter aftertaste comes, and the boy immediately spits out the leaf. Later he tries some flour. It is sticky and sour to the taste. Chris says that these plants only fueled an even greater hunger in him. The hero, without hesitation, tastes mushrooms, berries, and even carnivorous plants. Only Nin Mensa is an exception, and all other plants, the stranger they look, the easier they are to eat, and they are not bitter at all. But this boy has another problem. He needs to drink water. He found only a dirty puddle. Although it could have taken several hours, Chris wanted to return to the stream for water, but he did not watch the road at all and got lost in the dense forest, so now he did not remember how to return to the stream. Nothing threatens his body, and health poisons do not affect him. He takes a handful of earth and at that moment realizes, if he does not drink water now, he will die of dehydration. This boy swallows this dirty water. Chris thinks this is something new. The earth smells disgusting and tastes bitter. In the forest, there is not a drop of drinking water, nor food to be found. It is completely empty here. At night in the cave he found earlier, the hero falls asleep. He dreams that Klaus, with a crazy smile, cuts him in half. Chris wakes up, overwhelmed by fear. He breathes heavily and tries to calm down with trembling breaths. He makes a weapon for himself, hides in the cave during the rain, and feeds on insects. For several days he wandered through the Pisha forest and finally came across meat. He did not kill the animal. It was already lying dead before him. Still, it was the first animal he encountered. It was rotten, but for a hero who fed on grass and insects, it was a real delicacy. The smell was so disgusting that Chris couldn't stand to be nearby and thought that the grass might improve it a little. The boy is roasting a piece of meat over the fire, but as a result, it turns out to be burnt, spoiled meat with rosemary. He bites off a piece and immediately realizes, of all the meat he had ever tasted, this is the most disgusting. But for him, it is a real pleasure. He says he hasn't eaten this much in a long time. Although the forest is not scary, getting food here is a real challenge. The wound on Chris's leg has healed, possibly from the herbs he ate all day in the forest. Now he could hunt animals or monsters, but only the birds singing was heard around. Suddenly, the boy hears something. He sees tracks in the grass, several barefoot prints, and senses a faint smell of an animal. The hero sharply hides behind a tree. Chris sees an orc passing by him. The boy had seen an orc only once in his life, and even his father, despite all his abilities, had a hard time defeating it. If this orc is as strong as the previous one, then Chris is almost not lagging behind, and without abilities, the boy is very similar to his father. But the hero only has a homemade axe in his hands, so engaging in a fight with the orc is extremely risky for him. But the boy desperately wants meat, so he attacks the monster from behind. He barely reaches the orc with his axe. The monster turns to Chris and swings a huge club at him, but doesn't even see the boy standing in front of him. The hero, hiding behind a tree, thinks with relief that it's good the orc didn't hide. The monster notices the boy and hits the tree, but Chris manages to dodge instantly. The hero continues hiding behind the trees. The orc hits them, and suddenly his club gets stuck in one of the trunks. Chris sees this again and attacks from behind with the axe, but the weapon breaks instantly, and its working part remains in the monster's body. He jumps back, but suddenly the monster falls to the ground. The boy doesn't understand why the body doesn't move at all, and fears that it's because of him that he killed it. The monster, covered in blood, looks at Chris, but the wound is so deep that the orc can't even move. The hero finishes off the enemy, and thanks to his resistance to poisons can even eat spoiled meat. Since he defeated the orc now, he simply cooks something tasty from its meat. If the boy had clean water, he would cook the meat completely differently, but right now he simply has no choice. If he just chops the orc here into pieces, it will be hard to carry everything later, so he decides to drag the monster to the base, lifts it onto his shoulders, and carries it. Chris says with relief, the orc is actually lighter than it seemed. At the base, the boy thinks that the monster's body is so big that cutting it takes a lot of time, but thanks to this he managed to stockpile a huge amount of meat, and for him, this is a great result. Today he will leave only one catch and lets the rest dry. Chris feels like he insanely wants to eat meat, although he himself is covered in blood and smells the same. He gloomily thinks that he will have to somehow wash in that dirty water. Later, the neat boy grills shashlik over the fire and thinks that orcs are monsters resembling humans, and many believe that their meat cannot be eaten, but now he no longer cares. He takes out the cooked meat and feels. It does not smell spoiled at all, on the contrary, it smells like fresh meat. The hero decides to make sure himself, tries the meat for taste. Chris is simply delighted with this taste. The meat is very juicy, its aroma fills the boy's entire mouth, and he literally feels the flavor penetrating every cell of his body. He admits that orc meat is incomparable. The boy couldn't resist and ate the food he was supposed to save for the next day, and he justifies himself by saying he wanted to cook the meat in different ways, but due to extreme hunger, he simply forgot about it. The hero lay on the ground, recalling the fight with the orc, and realized they have very thick hair, tough skin, and under a thick layer of fat, muscles hide like armor. Until today, it seemed that a goblin could never defeat an orc with a single blow. But with a branch, he smashed the monster's head and even carried it to his shelter. The boy feels that after the specialty selection ritual, his physical strength has already increased and continues to grow. Even if his fate is to become a simple farmer, every ability makes him even better, and sometimes he feels that he has become too good. Chris cannot believe it. He has become stronger, although he lost to Klaus. It's the same with muscles. The more you load or even injure them, the stronger they become, and perhaps something similar happened to him. But the boy does not even suspect that his strength has increased too sharply. But the most important thing for him is that he himself defeated the orc. He built a shelter, laid a bed of soft grass, trained with wooden weapons, and gathered food supplies himself. Every day Chris drew stars on a stone, and a whole month passed this way. He ate all the orc meat he had and thought. Earlier, he would have thrown away everything he couldn't eat immediately without hesitation. But now, after that terrible hunger he endured, he would never do that again, even if it was a real monster. The boy still killed it for food, so he couldn't just take and throw away the leftover meat. The Acacia forest is to his liking, he would stay there to live, but the hero ate all the orc meat, so he can't survive on just grass. Chris feels that it has become quieter at home, but he still feels drawn to try to go to some city. For the near future, he lives with one goal: to train to become even stronger. He firmly decided he will definitely find something to surprise both his father and even the clouds. Chris emerges from the bottom of the pond and with a smile says he is glad to be here again. He drank muddy water from puddles and collected rainwater, but hadn't tasted clean water for months. Emotions that once seemed so usual were raging inside him. The hero looked at his dirty, torn cloak and said despairingly that he can't go to the city looking like this. He wants to pin the orc leather backpack to his belt because it looks much better than like a hangman. Chris arrives at the town of Reelsed. The town lies next to the royal capital, so it is always crowded here, and the streets buzz with lively movement. A little farther from the city where he lived, so this is just the perfect place for a quiet life. But besides all this, when Klaus became the sacred swordsman, he was most likely summoned to the capital. Reelsed is the closest city to the capital, so it is more convenient for him to keep an eye on Klaus here. Besides, he feels safe here and can calmly set up his base. But Chris notices that the locals look at him strangely and realizes he stands out because of his clothes. He was glad the check at the entrance turned out to be almost a formality, and he thought it would be worse if someone started to suspect something. The hero looks at the handful of coins in his palm and thinks, first buy food, then find a place to spend the night, and only then think about weapons. He enters the shop with golden bones, and the seller simply says, if the boy wants to sell something, he needs to be taken to the appraiser. The brand is so well known that Chris is unlikely to be kicked out. Now he is going to sell the things he stole from home when he fled. The seller leads the boy to the appraiser. At first, he politely greets him, but then suddenly starts looking suspiciously at the main character. The appraiser pushes Chris away and, angrily looking at the seller, shouts, "How could you let such a person in? You really have interesting goods for sale." The boy clutches his heart. He knows he made a mistake in his choice, but also feels that trusting a person in such clothes is too difficult. Someone silently watches him from around the corner. The hero steps into an area with old shops and houses, and can hardly believe that this is also part of real Zada. With just one glance, he sees what is sold in these tents, but he cannot name the goods themselves. The boy mumbles that looking inside is rude, and there are too few signs, but suddenly someone tugs his sleeve. Chris turned to the child in the hood and asked, "Are you lost?" The girl suddenly pulls out some incomprehensible thing and throws it right in the boy's face, and it instantly explodes. Dirt splattered his face, got right into his eyes. It hurts, and at the same moment the girl grabs his bag and runs away. From another backpack, he pulls out a bottle of water and rinses his eyes on the go. The hero notices how the girl confidently makes her way through the crowd and thinks, probably she moves so skillfully among people every day. But he instantly grabbed the thief and lifted him up, saying in a firm voice that using someone else's kindness is very bad. She screams desperately for him to let her go, and he responds with threats and strict prohibitions. The girl looks at the boy, tears in her eyes. She is trembling. Chris lets her go because he thinks she is a little girl, but suddenly it turns out she is his peer. The hero plunges into sad thoughts. Why does it seem to him that he is doing something bad, and asks why she chose the path of a thief. She covers her mouth with her hands, and the boy says that she won't be able to explain anything to him like that. The girl replies that he threatened her if she said anything. Chris begins to get irritated and sharply says that now everything is the other way around. The producer firmly says that there are no special reasons, and if there were only for the sake of survival. He understands why she became a thief, but cannot comprehend why she decided to rob him specifically. He does not seem rich. Maybe she is just deceiving him, or she is not smart at all. He says, judging by her skills, she steals quite often. Chris asks if she has a weapon. She briefly answers, no, and when he inquires if she has accomplices, the girl suddenly shudders. The girl hesitates a little, stammers and says no, and the boy immediately understands she is bad at lying. He threatens her. If she does not tell the truth, he will hand her over to the soldiers. She begs him not to do so, but the boy says she should stop lying. Chris thinks that meeting with the military is not to his liking, so he would never introduce her to them. The girl whispers that she has accomplices, people who live with her in an abandoned building. The hero asks how many of them there are, and she answers that including her there are 2. He asks again, does this mean that this man is also a thief, and receives an affirmative answer. The boy felt from her reaction that she was really not lying now, and immediately asks where this person lives. She points somewhere with her hand, and he says the same. If he goes where she points, nothing will happen to her. In some room, a stranger looks at the door and does not understand why the girl is taking so long to return. His heart tightens at the thought that she might have been captured. Chris enters the room, firmly holding the girl by the hood. She screams that she was captured, and then her partner unexpectedly pulls out a pistol. The hero decisively says that if the boy starts a fight, he will do something to the girl, and out of fear, the girl begs Raph to lower the weapon. Her partner, frightened, tells her that it won't change anything now she has already been caught, and how could she even think to bring the hero here? She answers in a trembling voice. Chris threatened her if she doesn't bring him, he will hurt her. The hero looks intently at Raph and feels. From his stance it is clear that the boy knows a bit about martial arts and can handle a sword, but he has serious problems with balance even if he tries to attack. Chris is too strong an opponent for him. The thief looks askance and asks, what does this hero want? He has no money. The hero calmly replies that he came only to warn them. He sternly warns, if they try to rob him again, he will take action himself. The thieves freeze in surprise. Is that all he wanted to say? Chris lets go of the girl and calmly says he will not demand money from them. Instead, he passionately desires to get information. Chris says that he just arrived in the city and knows almost nothing. He wanted to ask them how to get to the center, and Raph replies that if that's all he needs, then no problem. The hero addresses the girl and calls her red-haired. She agrees and immediately gets scared, not understanding what she has to do with it, and he says that, despite everything, she is the main criminal here. It is very important for Chris to learn about the city, which he does not know yet. He asks their names, but the man interrupts him and says, even after death, I won't say anything. The hero calls the girl Jesta, the boy Raph, and they look stunned. Chris thinks at that moment, what is this? Didn't they used to call each other by name before? The boys lead Chris through the city, and he thanks them with a smile for that. Raph replies that they really wanted that, and the hero says that regardless of their wishes, they helped him a lot. The boys are already about to return, but Chris sharply stops them, saying that they haven't shown him the most important place. They ask where do they sell the stolen goods. Raph answers simply, they pawn everything at a pawnshop of their acquaintance. The hero says there are a few more pawnshops nearby. Raph asks, why does he need that? Chris asks the boy to take him there. His request instantly made the boys tense, but the hero assures that he has no bad intentions. He just needs to sell something. Raph understands that Chris is also a thief and angrily reproaches him for it, but Chris brushes it off, saying he only stole once and those things belong to his father. Yet Raph firmly says it doesn't matter who you steal from, theft is theft. The hero coldly reminds them that he promised not to interfere if they don't help him, and that he won't forgive if they rob him again. He is not interested in their affairs at all. Raph shouts that he was not a threat to them, and Chris coldly replies, if they help him, he won't do anything to them. The boy says quietly that he understands everything, and that the place where they will take the hero will be the last. The boys go somewhere, and the seller, looking closely, asks if it is Raph and Gesta who came to him. The old man noticed Chris and, addressing the boy and girl, asked anxiously, what happened here? Raph says that they just met today, and he wants to sell something. Maybe the seller will want to take a look. The old man asks the hero to introduce himself, and he says his name. The seller raises his hand, smiles, and says that Chris is a nice name, then introduces himself as Raugans. The old man carefully examines the valuables and says that all these things are very valuable. He will appraise them thoroughly, and the boy can meanwhile walk around the pawnshop. Chris looks at the weapon for 5 gold and sadly says, it looks good, but with this budget I can't afford it. He takes in his hands a book titled Memoirs of Otto Botanica. He has never heard of this person before, and the book itself does not seem interesting, but for some reason it stubbornly attracts his attention. The boy will buy it if the price is cheap, and he sees the price is only 3 gold. He does not understand why this old book is valued so highly after all. In his opinion, it must be something special. Hister, passing by, asks with interest if the boy really knows how to read books. Chris replies that he was taught to read since childhood, asks the girl why she cannot, and hears an affirmative answer from her. Gestak was about to ask something, but changed his mind. At that moment, Rugen says that the hero has probably been waiting for a long time, and adds that he has finished the appraisal. The grandfather says, if the price suits the boy, he will buy everything and immediately start the paperwork. Earrings 2 silver each, ring 4, and pendant 3 gold. Chris was surprised by such prices. The grandfather says, although the necklace is small, it has a sapphire hanging on it. Raph says with admiration that Rugen gives 3 gold coins once a year, and the grandfather tells him to calm down and not eavesdrop. Raph suspiciously asks Chris if he really comes from a rich family, and the grandfather loudly adds, we are discussing prices here. The boy should not interrupt us. Finally, Rogan finds a pocket watch, buys it for 1 gold coin. The hero was disappointed upon learning the true price of the watch. It turned out that his father's watch was cheaper than he had imagined. He thought the watch was expensive because his dad always treated it very carefully. He says, I will sell everything except the watch, and they agree to this. Chris thanks him, and Rugens, smiling slyly, says that the items were stolen, so he couldn't sell them cheaper, and in a way, he also came out ahead. He asks if the hero has anything else, but he quietly replies, there is nothing else. The boy, embarrassed, says that he actually wanted to ask something. You show the book, and the grandfather says bitterly that few people pay attention to it. He added that he also became a little interested. There was something fascinating inside, so he raised the price, but he hasn't returned to it for many years. Chris says that seeing such a price, he thought the author was a respectable person. Ryujin laughs and replies that this is true, although he is not a celebrity and has not yet achieved anything outstanding. He says that if a true connoisseur appreciates the content of this book, they will recognize it as a real masterpiece. It is better than all other works. The hero replies, it really interested me. But now he lacks money, so he hopes that next time, coming to Rugen's with 3 gold coins, the grandfather will agree to sell him this book. The grandfather smiled and said that the boy can pay later, let him come when he has collected the required amount. Chris asks in surprise if the man really wants to share such details, and he admits that he feels awkward because he is just a stranger selling stolen goods. Rogan calms the man and says that such offers are rare. He adds that no one wanted to take this book for years, so if the hero takes it, he won't mind. But when Chris finally dares to buy this book, no matter how long it takes, this purchase will become a huge advantage for him. In the worst case, if he doesn't come at all, he will demand money from Raph. Raph is simply stunned and asks what exactly he intends to pay with. Chris says if Rogan doesn't mind, why refuse? Raph loudly declares he will not pay for this. After he leaves, the hero sincerely thanks the guys because thanks to them he earned more money than he could on his own. To this, RAFF replies that he was just lucky, as they earned such an amount only in a few months. Priest says that since they haven't eaten yet, he has to treat them. Jesta happily asks, "Really?" and Raf approaches this cautiously. The boy says to the girl, "Today we didn't earn anything, so first we need to find something to sell." Jester said that it is much better to invite them to lunch than to force them to run around and collect money themselves, and her partner readily agreed. He asks Chris in surprise if it isn't strange to treat those who stole from him, and Chris just smiles and says that it's simply his way of thanking them for showing him a good place. Gesta tells her partner not to argue they don't even have money to go out to eat. Chris felt that although he was not rich, that month in the forest when he lived alone was truly special, and even if those guys turned out to be thieves, the very presence of people he could talk to made him happy. The Trinity settled in the tavern, savoring the food and chatting among themselves. Chris had already eaten several servings, but he still thought that the food on that guy's plate tasted better, even though it was the same dish. The hero recalls living in the forest and having to eat orc meat without any spices or sauces. Raf, who felt sick from this, suggests not to mention orc meat during meals anymore. Chris says that at first he ate everything indiscriminately to avoid staying hungry and even drank water from a puddle. Raf says that the heroes would have died already if they ate poisonous plants, and the hero calmly replies that there is no need to worry about that. It should be added, this happened thanks to his ability resistance to poison. The guy opposite is shocked. He doesn't understand why the hero exposed him so easily, and Chris calmly replies that with or without him nothing will change significantly. Raf says that since he met the hero, it seemed to him that he didn't worry about anything at all. He adds that he knows several people with the same ability, but not all poisons can be simply shrugged off. To this, Chris replies that at most it will cause him stomach pain. Raf says with surprise that his friends are less sensitive to alcohol than others, and the hero smiles and replies that he ate almost everything indiscriminately and nothing happened to him. Gesta says in surprise, that's exactly why her Alileva bullet didn't affect him. Chris recalls how suddenly something hit him right in the eye. Rafa, stunned by this, explains that the ball contains a strong anesthetic. If it hits a person, they will be unable to move for almost the entire day. He is amazed even this did not affect the boy, and adds that probably he no longer just has resistance to poison, but full immunity. In the evening, leaving the tavern, Rafa asks Chris what he will do next. Chris replies that he wants to become an adventurer. He adds that thanks to his knowledge of sword techniques, he will be able to earn some money, and Rafa says that travelers usually either become mercenaries or turn to crime. Chris asks the guys directly, what exactly do they really plan to steal in the future to survive? Raf answers with a smile that it is his idea, and adds, if they lack the strength to become adventurers, at least their hands are nimble. The main character warns, if others catch us, we will end up behind bars, so it is better to look for another way to make a living. Later at the Adventurers Guild, a girl meets Chris and, smiling, tells him that registration for entry costs 1 silver coin. The boy gives her a coin. The girl smiles and says that personal data will be entered by magic. She asks for his name and age, but the boy gives only his name without a surname. Registration is complete, and the girl smiles as she hands him a card, saying that now he can take on tasks and engage in buying and selling at the guild. This card will store all information about tasks and ranks, and at the same time serve as an identity card, so do not lose it. Chris asks if she can take on some tasks, and the girl cuts him off. No, this is only for beginners. Add that the higher his rating, the more prestigious tasks he can take, and his rank will increase depending on the difficulty of the completed task. The hero asks, what is rank? She smiled and said that everything starts from the lowest first to novice, then bronze, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, diamond, and then Rihalkin Hyrokin, but such high levels are very rare, so there is nothing to worry about. Chris asks what skills give ranks, and the girl calmly says, it all depends on the profession, and rank is determined by rating and completed tasks. She says roughly this, for beginners all skills must be at level 10, for bronze level 20, for silver 40, and with each new title these indicators double. Chris continues to bombard her with questions, and she gets very tired from this. Now the hero was assigned a brutal mission to exterminate goblins. For each one he will receive 2 coppers, and the proof will be the severed left ear, which must be brought. He failed with the orc, but now he will carefully control the strength of his strike. Chris cuts one of the goblins in half with a sword. The hero feels strange. Even when he fought the orc and cut him in half with one precise strike, the feelings remain the same. He does not know why, but every time he is overwhelmed by the feeling that an incredible power is awakening within him. After Chris became an adventurer, for a whole 2 months he did only one thing: exterminated goblins. After moving to the city, his life hardly changed, only now he leaves his room. Morning knocked and Getaz greeted the hero with a smile, inviting him to breakfast. Raf says they are already leaving, so he asks to close the door. And so the three of them began living together. Chris has no problems with food, clothing, and housing. During this time, he even managed to save 3 gold coins, and yesterday his adventure rank jumped from beginner to bronze. Pasha, to test one of the theories, tomorrow you will go to the forest. Memoirs of Otto Botanist, a fascinating story about discovering the useful properties of new plants, known from legends. All their names are clearly indicated, and all information is presented interestingly and understandably. He was most impressed by the notes about a mysterious plant. It has a poison for which there is no cure. Besides the known poisonous plants, there are also those whose toxicity is simply incredible, and it has not yet been studied in detail. But among all the plants Chris tried in the forest, there was one that truly made the body stronger. Perhaps it is thanks to this that he will become stronger. The hero hurried to the church to record his abilities before eating the plants, and finally finding out his true skill level, he heard that this is where the adventure cards are kept. He himself will not find out, and they still take 1 gold coin for it. The priest greeted Chris with a gentle smile and asked how he could help. The boy says he wants to find out how strong he is, and the priest, recognizing him as an adventurer, asks him to go to another room and wait a bit. The hero stared into the magic orb, sighed, and said that if he could test himself, he wouldn't have to spend a whole gold coin. The priest enters the room and sincerely apologizes for making you wait. He introduces himself as the rector of this church. His name is Grem. He waved it off. If Chris wants to confess, he has no time. Chris replied that he just wanted to test his abilities, and then the priest can help. Grem asks for 1 gold coin and the adventurer's card. He grabs the ball, uses it, and then returns the card to Chris. The priest hurriedly walks away, apologizing. He has to go, an important ceremony is about to begin. I look at the card, the numbers seem to knock. The hero's physical strength is 10, plus 6 added, muscle strength is 5, plus 8 added, endurance is 7, plus 2 added, and agility is 4. O equals. He expected more after all those orcs and goblins, but some skills didn't grow at all, and he is still far from the beginner level. Although the card does not indicate the level of sword mastery, these numbers loudly scream about his current skills and strength. Chris is confident that the numbers in parentheses show exactly how his skills will grow as soon as he eats the plant. If he is not mistaken, these numbers are simply added to his current stats. And this skill does not provide resistance to poison, it grants full immunity to it. Late in the evening, Chris gathers a bunch of things and prepares to set off. The guest opens his eyes and, not fully awake yet, asks where is he going. The boy apologizes for waking her, says he has a few errands and will be gone for a few days, asks to pass this on to Raf, and the hero says he has already prepaid the lodging, so there is no need to worry about it. The girl simply replies, "Of course, I will pass this news to the boy." In the forest, Chris recalls how, leaving there, he thought it was a valuable experience. Without food and water, he would have long perished if he did not have immunity to poison. The man returns to his shelter, sighs with relief, and says that everything remained as it was. He gathered several plants. For 2 months, he carefully watched the shops and craft workshops, and now he realized, even those plants that are sold as medicine and food grow in the forest. But this time the hero will collect only those plants he did not know before. If he had remembered what he ate earlier, he would have saved himself a lot of time. However, back then he only thought about how to survive, so he remembered little. Chris grills kebabs with mushrooms, because he remembered that mushrooms are actually quite tasty. He tries these fruits, the aftertaste is off-putting, and his tongue also dries out. He doesn't like it, but it's still better than bitter plants. Next, he tries a carnivorous plant. Its taste is sour and rotten because it eats insects, and it seems there are still some remains of a fly in it. Chris warns, without a doubt, not all plants are edible. But his goal is to collect 30 species of poisonous plants, so he won't stop for a step. In a week, the hero will gather a bunch of plants. Before coming here, he was a bit worried, but deep in the forest there is peace, and it's easy to adapt here. He says that next time it will be even better, and maybe then he will really feel like he's on vacation, although he'll have to sort out all those failed decisions. When Chris arrives in the city, he goes into a church. The priest notices him and asks if he has visited them recently, and the boy apologizes and quietly says that he is asking for help again. Graham says that only a few days have passed, so he doubts the hero could have improved his skills so much. The hero just smiles and says it's okay, and the priest obeys him. Chris receives a postcard with new information and thinks with horror. If he doesn't improve his skills, all the time spent collecting plants will be in vain. He sees that in the end, strength and endurance have increased by 1 unit. Here is what turned out. one of the plants he found in the forest, can really improve certain skills now. He needs to find out which one exactly. The hero is ready to do anything, and now that he understands it's possible, he will do whatever is necessary. Raph shouts at Chris, his voice trembling, "Why did you disappear for a whole week and not say a word?" The hero, slightly confused, quietly replies that he asked Guest to inform everyone about his departure. Raph is still shouting, telling what exactly she conveyed, and angrily asks why the guy didn't tell him personally. He asks where he went, and in response hears only one thing: the guy really wants to leave. The hero hands him a shashlik so that he finally shuts up, and says he never even thought about such a thing. He also gives a shashlik to Hesti, and says that this is her portion. The girl thanks him, Raph eats with pleasure, and Chris smiles and tells the girl that when she becomes a famous traveler, she will invite him to a restaurant. He never finishes speaking, and then Raph asks where that guy was. Chris realizes that he can no longer remain silent. Earlier he told the guys that he had to hide in the forest, and now he returned because he had to solve a matter that was troubling him. He asks the guys, "How is your work as adventurers going?" Silence falls, and Raph says that he and the girl are not suitable for each other. They counted and the heart sank. Hunting goblins costs 1 silver per day, lodging 4, food 6, so they have almost no money left. He says that if any of them get injured and can't hunt, but Chris interrupts him, saying that all this sounds very complicated and just wishes them luck. Raphael wants to suggest something, but the hero simply refuses without even listening to him. The guy insists that he hasn't finished yet and offers to join forces, and Chris replies dryly, that's exactly why he interrupted him. He simply doesn't have money to support both. Raph is still shouting that the hero shouldn't lie. He hasn't worked for a whole week, but he's not starving and even bought those same Miyaki Torai, so he must have some savings. Hess tries to calm his friend, but Chris irritably cuts him off, saying that he achieved everything himself through hard work. Adding, if they always perform so spectacularly thanks to food, Raph will cover all expenses. The guy quietly apologizes, and the main hero believes he understands his friend, but in reality, he really doesn't have that much money. He thought maybe he could somehow use these guys. Chris asks what they do. Raph says that no one intends to reveal their weaknesses, they have nothing special. The hero smiles and assures, it's all right, he has already told everything about himself, so they have nothing to worry about. If he wanted to kill them, he would have done it long ago. Hesta said with a sparkle in her eyes that she is a mage and can heal with magic. Raph angrily grumbles that she told everything, and the girl calmly says that it is not a problem. She trusts Chris. In this image, a combat profession, but it looks a bit strange, and people still whisper that this job is one of the most uncomfortable. Controlling magic is a real challenge. You either have to study at a magic school or independently master knowledge from magical books. Only nobles and teenagers who have gained a prestigious profession after a special ritual can study at such schools. As for magical books, that is a completely different story. Everything depends on the book itself and whether you have the knowledge to read its ancient texts, and they are not cheap either. Chris smiles and says that her specialty is better than farming, but still not the most successful profession, and Gester agrees with this. She says that she has abilities and dreams of becoming a magician. She admitted that she started stealing to save money for a grimoire. The hero recalls how she asked if he could read. She is surprised that he still remembers this, but he replies that he was just curious then. Gesta, with a trembling voice, says that she has a request. If she manages to get a grimoire, will Chris be able to teach her to read it? He believes that studying magic is hardly related to prestigious combat professions, and the boy agrees to her request because he believes that the girl can change in the future. Gesta shines with joy and sincerely thanks him for agreeing. Chris asks what happened to Raph, and he only replies that he won't say what exactly he specializes in. The girl firmly says that Raph is a holy knight, and his abilities are Divine Strike, Divine Protector, and Defender's Breath, while the evil man coldly asks if she has provided all the necessary information. Being a holy knight is a dream among combat professions. They are taken into the royal guard, and for this, it is not necessary to be a knight. Even an ordinary adventurer can become one. Gesta confidently says, as if reading the hero's thoughts, but the truth is different. Raph was seriously injured in childhood, and with a damaged knee, he still finds it difficult to walk. Chris recalls that because of this, the boy had a good posture, but the stance itself was unsuccessful and unbalanced, and Raph is a little angry that the boy realized this only after Gesta's story. The hero says, these guys are probably the only ones who still hunt only goblins. Raph says bitterly, he is generally unlucky in life. Chris assures that if Raph's knee heals, everything will be fine, but Raph replies that it is not so as long as he can remember. Village doctors always said that such wounds do not heal. The hero asks, why did he give up so quickly just because of someone's words? Raph, angry, blurted out that he did not give up, he was looking for other doctors. But it turned out to be impossible to heal his injury. Chris says that it goes back to childhood. When a child is abandoned, they are left without money and without respect, and no matter how hard they try, nothing works out. But the guy is convinced that very soon everything will change. He says that he realized both guys have potential, so he decided to join forces with them into one team. Everyone is happy about this, and the hero understands that he has no right to judge others because of the consequences of the sacred ritual, since he himself once lost his family because of it. He says that now he does not want to work together, and this surprises Rafa. Chris reminds me he also had his own affairs. He adds that the team will be created only when the guys learn to kill goblins lightning fast. Raph screams and begs to unite, saying that they won't be able to do anything on their own. The hero's request seems ridiculous to him, but Jesta still agrees to this condition. She is determined, as if she has already decided everything, and her friend only looks at such an answer in surprise. So they make an agreement among themselves. In the guild, Chris says that he wants to take a quest, and the girl behind the counter replies that now bronze quests are available to him and asks if he wants to try. The hero asks what quests he can take, and the girl smiles and replies that there are several types of bronze-level quests. She asks the guy to say directly whether he wants to take a quest with a large amount of destruction or a small one, and he answers that there are several options. The girl flips through the sheets with tasks and suggests several options. Destroy all domestic poultry, small lizards, bubbly streams emerging in the abandoned village in the east, and all hydroslugs in the lower course of the Mitria River. Such a ruthless order spread like a cold wind. She says that for some tasks it is enough to destroy one species. Chris asks why some tasks have locations and others do not. The girl replies that tasks without a specific location are ordered by those who need trophies from certain monsters, and to complete such a quest, it is enough to bring their bodies or parts of trees after destruction. The hero clarifies that this task with a specified location requires killing monsters and dealing damage to them, and receives confirmation. She says that usually such tasks involve searching for monsters, gathering information about them, destroying them, and returning with trophies, but all this takes a lot of time and effort. Chris asks which task gives a bigger reward, and the girl simply answers, for destroying domestic poultry. This is an assignment from the butcher, so you need to collect meat. The base reward is 1 gold coin, but if you bring more meat, you can get up to 3. Yes, this is the cheapest task. Find the slimes that hide in the bubbles, and as a reward, you will receive 4 silver coins. The hero is sure. For a simple task with a meager payment, you only need to kill 1 monster, but for a novice, this is as difficult as dealing with 20 goblins. It is impossible to deny the bronze level brings more benefit, and if you look at the price, it is more profitable to go on the task with the chicken, but this task is highly valued for a reason. There is a risk if a person delays completing the task for too long, the money will simply run out. He stands confused and cannot decide which task to take on. The day was sunny, insects swarmed everywhere, attracted by the smell of prey remains, and the main character cautiously peeked from behind a tree, carefully watching their behavior. Suddenly he feels someone's presence. Before him appears the one he was waiting for, a hedgehog slime, a kind of mucus. Seeing it, the hero gets a bit nervous and loses patience. The hero mumbles under his breath how disgusting and gross everything happening is. His words are fragmented. A slight stress is noticeable in his voice, while the hydro slime silently crawls further ahead. The warrior froze in thought. He somewhat regrets taking this particular task, thinking he could handle it effortlessly, but now he realizes he was wrong. Even if he wins, he will have to discard weapons and gear soaked with the monster's smell. Looking closely at the monster, the hero noticed a dark spot that is where its core hides, an important target, and he emphasized, one must be extremely careful because it is hard to tell when the monster is looking directly at him. Gathering all his courage, the warrior clenches his teeth and prepares for the decisive strike. His thoughts are clear and sharp. Only one precise hit is needed for victory, and with a sharp movement, he rushes forward to strike right at the center. The adventurer's attack fails. He shouts irritably that one hit is not enough, and despite the failure, immediately decides to try again. Firmly gripping his sword, he charges at the monster again. This time his plan succeeds, and he destroys the core. After such a trial, Chris, filled with bitterness, emotionally vows to himself never to take on similar tasks again, as they only leave him with bad impressions. A month passed after the unsuccessful encounter with the hydro slime, and the hero clearly remembered, one must carefully choose whom to fight. During this time, there were no problems. He calmly completed bronze-level tasks. Days flew by one after another, and after lunch he sat down to fill out reports and prepared for tomorrow's tasks. Every free minute the traveler devoted to persistent sword training, and also diligently studied plants, often visiting the Healer's Guild and special herb shops. The warrior pondered how much he had earned this month without rest. He was pleasantly surprised he had accumulated as many as 20 gold coins, and every day at least 4 silver coins came steadily. Chris often visited Ruzhin, and when he came again, he heard a familiar greeting. The old man asked if the hero was after weapons again, but this time the warrior declined and politely said that today he wanted to pay for a book. The old man asked Chris not to rush, whispered that he would accept as much as he could, and also inquired if the hero had enough coins, but Chris smiled and confidently replied that he had already collected the required amount, so there was no need to worry. The hero sincerely thanked the old man for the chance and realized that without the book from Rugen, he would never have discovered the true power of his gift. The old man, nodding without hesitation, said that he understood the main hero's choice. He also confirmed that he would take everything irrevocably. The grandfather addressed Chris with sincere gratitude. The adventurer smiled and replied that in fact, he was the one who should thank him. Then the main hero continued the story. He, as if trying to convince, emphasized that this book was very useful. Thinking about the old man, Chris transferred coins from one hand to the other. Suddenly the traveler seemed to shudder. Something very important flashed in his mind. He turned back to the old man again, eager to ask something. Rogan asked what exactly the warrior wanted to find out from him. It turned out the warrior was eager to learn about the scrolls for necromancers. He also asked if they could be obtained. The old man fell silent and pondered, as if recalling something. He stood up, approached one of the drawers, and opened it. Inside were several scrolls. Taking one, he handed it to Chris and said that although the scroll was old, it was genuine. The book in a black cover with beautiful patterns looked even more mysterious, and the main hero held it in his hands and wondered what was written inside. He said that Gesta had begged him not to sell the scrolls, so he simply hid them, and the boy wondered, did the old man then think that later Gesta herself would buy those scrolls? Rugens also replied, this book would be suitable for a true adventurer, but the girl would hardly like it. He admitted that Gesta might learn something, but most likely she would just run away, and he was not even going to look for her. Chris confessed he thought that Rugen trusted her more, since they had known each other for a long time, but the old man replied that precisely because of this, he did not trust her, and therefore kept a certain distance in the relationship. Hearing the offer to buy the book, the young man asked how much it cost, and the old man calmly answered, 2 platinum coins. This price shocked the main character. The warrior, clearly impressed, asked again how much it exactly cost. After all, 1 platinum coin was equal to 10 gold coins, and this was clearly more than he had now. The young man mentally noted that he had never imagined that a scroll could cost so much. The young man admitted that, of course, he had heard about the high price of such books, but did not expect it to be so exorbitant. Rugens also said that he hesitated for a long time whether to buy this book, and in the end did not buy it. The book just remained lying useless. The old man decided and offered the young man to buy the scroll. Chris was surprised to learn that it could really be purchased. When the old man found out who the buyer was, he agreed to receive full payment later, but because of the high price asked for an advance payment. The young man was turning his plan over in his head. To buy the scroll to teach the guest magic, he understood that she could not use it yet and the chances were few, but his goal was to unite with her because he considered it profitable. The young man decisively decided he would not allow doubts about Gesta to shake his choice, so he carefully pushed the expensive book aside and put it on the table. This time Chris refused finally. He thanked the old man for his trust and firmly confirmed this was his final decision. The old man listened carefully to the main character's opinion. Rugen softened the situation a little and added that if the boy changed his mind or collected the required amount, he could always come. He would wait. The boy thanked him again, sincerely grateful, and left. The young man decided to spend his savings later. He would visit the church to check his skills. He also said that he had collected some poisonous plants, dried them, and ate about half. Chris noticed that the more he dried the plants, the more bitter they became, and he sadly admitted that he still lacked knowledge about them to use them properly. The young warrior wondered whether to improve his skills by consuming poisonous plants. He understood that he could not rely solely on this method, and Chris recalled that last time, his endurance and strength had slightly increased. When he approached the church, he hoped to be lucky. Entering inside, Chris pondered how the clergy would regard his actions from the outside. He looked like a man who simply throws money around, and with these thoughts he approached the priest. In the silence of the church, the priest became a little worried upon seeing the boy again and cautiously asked if he really wanted to test his abilities once more. After all, very little time had passed since the last time. The main character calmly replied that everything was fine, and even if the results did not change, he would not complain. The priest was a little surprised but still agreed to check his status, and after some time of checking, handed him a card. He added that even if his skills did not improve, Chris's goal would still remain unchanged and strong, and the young man politely but somewhat sharply replied that he understood, and the priest did not need to keep repeating the same thing. The priest was a little embarrassed, apologized for the repetitions, hurriedly said goodbye, and left, while the adventurer watched the young man as he walked away. Then he looked at the card he was given. It showed his characteristics. This time in the left column, endurance and strength had increased by 1, while the right column remained unchanged, and Chris thought that this was thanks to hunting. The main character noticed an important detail. The indicator had increased by exactly the same amount as after the previous consumption of the plant. This confirmed that his actions with poisonous plants had become more effective. The more he puzzled over his experiments with plants, the clearer it became. Consuming one of these plants could indeed enhance its properties, but everything turned out to be not so simple. The warrior honestly admitted his knowledge about plants was still superficial. He suspected that drying might have killed some of their beneficial properties. Regarding skills, he said he did not know of plants that could directly improve them. To fully test his hypothesis, Chris decisively ate all the plants he had. Then he wanted to go to the church again to see if his characteristics had changed after he ate all the plants. It was already getting dark outside. The young traveler was returning home. Stepping over the threshold, he suddenly noticed something interesting. A familiar couple was kneeling. The girl looked calm and confident, and Ralph beside her was completely different. He was doubtful, looking at her uncertainly, and it seemed that she was the one who made him stay by her side. When the main character finally stepped over the threshold of the house, what he saw struck him, and he blurted out, "What are you doing, and most importantly, why?" Ralph wanted to say something about Jesta, but she sharply interrupted him and ordered him to be silent. To emphasize her words, she slapped him on the head, then confidently looked at the main character and pronounced his name. She turned to Chris with a confident sparkle in her eyes and said that their team was already strong enough to fight goblins, and directly offered Chris to join them in joint tasks. Ralph, who stood nearby, immediately supported her decision. Chris mentally felt that something had changed in the group. Previously, everyone returned home tired, but now their faces shone with inspiration. He could not even imagine that the conversation about this would happen so quickly. Everything happened faster than he thought, so the young warrior did not hesitate. He glanced once more at the couple who were still kneeling. After a moment of reflection, he suggested that they test their strength and coordination in action the next day to find out how well they could work together, and Jesta immediately agreed, sincerely thanking him for this opportunity. The guest sharply turned to Ralph and reproachfully asked why he was silent, and the young man, embarrassed and lowering his eyes, muttered that he supported the proposal to unite with Chris. Thinking over the proposal, the main character decided that if Jesta's group really destroyed goblins so easily, then joining them would benefit his plans, so he took out a skewer and handed it to them. Saying that he bought it for them, he suggested trying it. They immediately blossomed with joy. It was their favorite shashlik, and they sincerely thanked him for the tasty food and care. A little later, editing the list, Chris thoughtfully reviewed his expenses. He admitted that he had spent quite a lot of money on experiments, but considered it necessary to achieve the goal, so the warrior decided to pay less attention to these plants in the future. Suddenly, Ralph approached, looking closely at one of Chris's plants, and asked what kind of plant it was and why it was growing here. The warrior replied that it was a poisonous plant. If eaten, one could die, and the boy, hearing this, exclaimed fearfully. He looked with indignation and could not understand how Chris dared to bring such a dangerous thing home. In response, the main character calmly said that the main thing was simply not to eat it. In fact, it was not as scary as Ralph thought. Not giving up, he immediately threw out his idea. Maybe Chris makes a lot of money trading these plants, but he calmly replied that he did not sell anything like that. Chris patiently explained that it was precisely thanks to his abilities that he could safely consume it, but another participant insisted. With such capabilities, there was no point in risking and dealing with such dangerous things. Ralph was confused. He did not understand why they needed to eat them at all. The last thing he naively whispered, "Maybe it's very tasty." Chris cut him short, "Keep dreaming," making it clear that it was not about the taste at all. After the morning run, the boy was gasping, catching every breath. He noticed that he needed more time to recover his breathing after running than others, and returning to the hero, said that he finally understood why he went out so early every morning. Understanding the situation, the young traveler instantly sat down and offered Ralph to sit on his back so the group could move faster. The girl nearby was surprised by this, and the boy also did not expect it and even exclaimed in surprise. He tried to object to the young traveler, assuring that he was fine and could go on by himself. Chris replied that he was moving too slowly. This was the only way to move faster. He looked at the boy and issued an ultimatum. If he did not want to work as a team, their agreement was cancelled and there would be no other choice. Ralph blushed a little and realized that there was no point in arguing anymore. Everything was going well. Gesta was walking ahead, and Chris, carrying the tired boy in his arms, was walking behind. Approaching the forest where the goblins lived, the main character sat down, giving the novice adventurer a chance to get off him. Then he offered to show everyone how easily one could deal with goblins, and the group quickly agreed. Gesta turned to Ralph and asked if everything would be as usual. Ralph briefly and confidently said that she could rely on him, and with faces full of determination, they got to work. Carefully making their way through the tall grass, they finally saw what they were looking for. The girl in front gave a signal and pointed at the target, a small goblin with a stick. She crept like a shadow, completely silently. When she was right up close, the girl suddenly hit him on the back of the head, slightly stunning him, and quietly stepped back. Ralph, on the other hand, crawled closer and closer. His intention was clear. In the tall grass, he was almost unnoticed and silently waited for the right moment to deliver the decisive blow without getting hurt himself. The goblin lunged up close, but the boy reacted instantly and stabbed him with a weapon. The blow was so powerful that the monster died instantly, and then the girl asked if their actions impressed the boy. The mage was a little embarrassed, admitting that their tactics might look strange, but immediately added proudly that they easily defeat goblins. Chris mentally evaluated their fighting style and, as a warrior, thought he finally understood how they manage. Hest cleverly lured goblins to Ralph, who could not run fast, and then they finished off the enemies together. Their tactics really worked. Having seen everything with his own eyes, the main hero without hesitation agrees to join the team with them. The young mage shines with joy and does not hide his happiness. Finally, they will be able to go hunting together. Ralph probably wanted to appear modest or distrustful, so he muttered that he himself handles goblins well and does not particularly need help, but the girl sharply interrupted him, irritated that he was being added again. Hesta, not hiding her surprise, threw a simple but sharp question at the young man. Does he really want to spend his whole life as a novice, hunting only goblins, hinting that it is time to take on more serious tasks and develop? The boy firmly said to Chris, "We are counting on you." The main hero replied, "I also rely on both of you, and I am glad to work with you." The warrior decided, "First we will sell the loot, and in the evening we will discuss all the details." The mage heard this and quickly agreed, but the novice adventurer, on the contrary, clearly did not look pleased. With reproach, he asked Chris if now, having just become part of their team, he no longer wants to hunt with them. When Jester and Ralph returned in the evening, they cheerfully greeted Chris. Seeing them, he also nodded in response. They proudly said that they brought him kebabs in honor of the holiday. He froze with surprise when he realized that they were thinking the same thing. Having said this, he added that he himself bought something on the way, and the rookie warrior also reminded that today they officially became a team. Ralph said a little disappointedly that they didn't even have to buy food themselves, then reluctantly added that there can never be too many kebabs. Chris explained that he didn't buy them at all, and when the guys saw the table they froze with admiration. On the table were steamed buns with meat from the famous Seika Manaju, sashimi from Maruha, and rice with additives from the popular Maruha canteen. Jester and Ralph froze with surprise and exchanged glances. They recognized dishes from the very same restaurants they had only looked at from afar before. The boy couldn't hold back his emotions, and the wizard was also delighted and involuntarily exclaimed. The rookie timidly asked if it was really edible, and Chris calmly replied, "Yes, of course," and added that from now on we are one team, hinting that we truly deserved this delicacy. After a hearty dinner, the main character, without getting up from the table, posed an important question for himself and suggested discussing the future goals of their new team. Chris continued speaking seriously, persistently explaining. He did not mean abstract dreams, not just 3 adventurers, but their concrete goals. Ralph asks if it's bad to have a goal to eat as much as you want, and the warrior replies that he already eats as much as he wants, completely refuting his interlocutor's words. The girl, stumbling a little and mixing up words, confesses a dream. She wants to become a magician and earn well. Her story is fragmented but sincere, and she doubts whether her own goal is suitable for this. The main character replied to Jesta that a personal goal suits him perfectly. Then he directly asks her, will she leave the team if she becomes a mage and starts earning well? The girl stumbled, admitted that she didn't even know what to say, and added that she was not going to leave, but did not finish. Ralph interrupted her and said that the one who started this conversation should be the first to tell about his goal. Chris clenched his fists. With a stone face, he quietly whispered that he wanted to take revenge on his younger brother. Chris added that he wanted to take revenge but would remain on the team. Silence instantly fell in the room. Gesta wanted to say something confusedly, but Ralph interrupted her. He asked again if Chris really wanted to kill his brother, and Chris briefly but confidently answered, yes. Ralph exclaimed in shock. He sharply stood up and said in a firm voice that this must be done alone, without their involvement. Chris, calm and confident, replied to him that if he could handle it himself, he wouldn't have told them about his plans at all. The boy hesitantly asked if it was about his brother. Looking at their leader, he realized he was not mistaken. The main character admitted that he was taking revenge, not just like that his brother was one of the strongest people. After some time, Gesta quietly whispered that now she understood everything and knew why that boy ran into the forest then. The young warrior coldly added, if he hadn't accidentally stumbled that day, he would have been killed. Chris continued, his voice trembling. Every time he remembers that moment, he cannot forgive Klaus. He is sure that if they meet again, his brother will definitely try to kill him. The girl, addressing the leader, admitted, in such a situation, even the desire to take revenge on one's own brother seems quite natural. Ralph listened to the main character, understood his motives, and sincerely explained his point of view. The hero's adoptive father is no longer among the living, but once he really wanted to kill him. Meanwhile, the young adventurer firmly stated that he was not going to help Chris in the murder. The group leader calmly said, the most important thing for him is that the participants accept his intentions and assured that there are no problems. Suddenly guessing something, Ralph sharply asked if the main character had touched the dry grass at night to poison his brother, but he denied it and explained that he actually intended to eat it. He added that he did not even hope to poison a person of sword master level, and even if he could, he would never choose such a method. The boy did not give up after the explanations. He persistently and directly asked what kind of grass it was, and Chris only smiled and said he would tell about it only when they officially became a team. The group leader explained that this poisonous grass awakens hidden abilities. If eaten constantly, the body gradually strengthens. The young traveler did not believe what he heard. He had never encountered such a thing before, so he was skeptical about it. The main character added that an ordinary person would not survive such poison and would never learn about its properties. Ralph muttered that it sounded pretty cool, and Chris suggested that probably only he noticed these features. Returning to the conversation, he addressed the group and asked why they were here. The girl thought a little, hesitating about what task to set for herself. Then she said she wanted to become a mage and be useful to Ralph and Chris. A little shyly asked if this could be considered a goal, and the boy agreed with her thoughts. Addressing the knight, he asked about him. He still did not answer. Ralph, as always, suddenly exclaimed that he wants to become the strongest adventurer that everyone will know. The adventurer smiled and said that it seemed as if all this was made up just for him. Ralph instantly blushed and shouted for him not to laugh, and the young warrior, somewhat ironically, added that he was actually not laughing at him at all. Chris calmly said that he and the newcomer have the same goal, and this really surprised Ralph. The group leader said that people consider his brother Klaus a true genius, one that hasn't been seen for hundreds of years. Now few know about him, but very soon everyone will consider him a great hero. The young man remarked to Chris that for a person who hates him, he overestimates his brother too much, and that sounds strange. After some time, the knight thought and agreed, saying, if that is really so, then my goal is to surpass my brother. Gesta summed it up simply. Chris wants to take revenge on his brother, Ralph needs more power to surpass him, and her goal is to help everyone achieve theirs. The main hero solemnly stood up and proclaimed that their main goal now is to surpass the sword master Klaus. He asked if anyone had objections, and the knight and Chris simultaneously replied that there were none. So now the team gathered true curiosities: a mage who cannot cast spells, a holy knight who can barely walk, and a farmer who fears no poison. Since then, an awkward but strong partnership arose between them, and thus the weakest team in history appeared. The young knight, with indignation and confusion in his voice, asked again if they really would not go on the expedition together as a team, and disappointment was heard in his voice. This unexpected turn right after forming their alliance struck him. Chris calmly and wisely replied that he now has matters he considers much more important, and that need to be resolved immediately. He continued to explain, calmly and objectively assessing their current capabilities, and openly stated that Gesta and Ralph were not yet ready to take on bronze tasks. It was too dangerous for them. Knight sharply stood up and, demanding an answer indignantly, asked why the team was created at all if they could not act together from the very beginning, and her posture clearly showed dissatisfaction and disappointment. Chris, despite the storm of emotions inside, remained calm and explained how he saw the matter. There were two main tasks: either to find a way to heal Ralph's chronic injury or to wait until the guest became a mage. The young man, noticeably saddened by Chris's words, dropped his shoulders and quietly muttered in response. This meant they would have to act separately, not together, until these problems were resolved. The traveler looked Ralph in the eyes and spoke the first step of their plan. First, they would go together to the doctors to find out if the leg was really incurable. The young knight, completely confused, began to say that he had no money for the examination. The main character confidently said that he would resolve all other issues and organizational matters himself, and his voice already showed agreement with the situation and readiness to take responsibility. Chris addressed Hesty and Ralph and directly advised, Although you are separated, look for any opportunities to earn money and try to earn as much as possible during this time. The knight, touched by Chris's concern for his health, sincerely began to thank him, but the main character suddenly interrupted him and insistently explained that Chris acted not only out of concern for the knight, but also for the common good of the entire team. The guest, grumbling irritably, noted that practical difficulties would now begin. What was she supposed to do while they went? The warrior felt that hunting goblins alone would be much harder than the three of them together. Chris did not hesitate and immediately gave the mage a specific task. He asked her to gather as much information as possible about the rare and dangerous monster called the wandering woodpecker. He explained the task to find out where this creature could be encountered, how it behaved, and most importantly, to find its weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Chris emphasized that any information was important and they were ready to pay for it. Gesta gladly and willingly agreed to take it on, promising Chris to find out everything she could, but categorically refused to take money, emphasizing that Chris already pays for the examination and it would be unfair to demand more from him for this. Chris clearly stated that arguing over money is pointless, so everything should be divided immediately. All profits from joint work are shared equally, and all expenses are also distributed among everyone. Gesta addressed the hero and said that in that case she counts on him, and the hero confidently replied that he also counts on her. In the Healers Guild, one of the employees asked why the hero had come. The traveler quietly explained that he wanted to have an old knight injury examined. The doctor, examining Naif's leg, said the injury looked serious. He asked when exactly it happened, and Ralph replied that it was about 7 years ago. The doctor delivered terrible news. Due to the long absence of treatment, the meniscus was damaged, and the ligaments were completely torn. The young knight, clutching his heart with anxiety, asked, "Does this mean full recovery is impossible?" The doctor calmly replied, "It is treatable." Ralph exclaimed, not believing his ears. The doctor confirmed he was not lying, but to solve the problem, the knee must be opened, ligaments transplanted and sewn, and special metal oil must be injected into the damaged meniscus. The patient, catching his breath, anxiously asked if this was really serious and if it would really help. Chris asked about the price, and the employee sternly warned that the operation would be expensive and the mucus oil would have to be extracted by himself. The doctor named the price 20 platinum coins. Ralph exclaimed in shock that this was too large a sum. The main hero said coldly that such a price is too high. He immediately asked the doctor if there was another option. The employee replied that the wound heals slowly, and it is clear that the leg has already been used. He also said if the injury were fresh, it could be healed with a special potion without surgery, but now much time has passed, and there are no simple solutions. The doctor emphasized that the situation is very serious, and added that even the complex and expensive surgery to restore the ligaments, which he proposes, is already the cheapest of all options in their guild of healers. Chris, dissatisfied with the answer, could not bear it and asked another question, whether there is a place outside the official guild of healers where such an operation could be done cheaper. After hearing this in the guild, Ralph was consumed by anxiety. He went to bed with a weight on his chest and could not calm down. When the door to his room quietly opened, the guest softly called him by name. Seeing that he did not respond, she did not disturb him and decided to ask the hero later. The girl cautiously asked if his leg was really that bad and if it was true, and Chris, interrupting her anxious guesses, denied it, but his face remained serious. The girl, not understanding what had happened in the guild, asked for a more detailed explanation, and the main hero continued to explain. Treatment in the Guild of Healers is possible, but it costs 20 platinum coins. Chris suddenly remembered the doctor's words as a guild member. He could not speak directly, so he only dropped a hint and advised to find out more about a man named Blood, after which they eagerly began to search for any information about him. The traveler laid out the results of his investigation to Gesta and seriously explained. According to his data, Blood was once considered the best healer in the guild, but now he decided that he could make good money from his skills. The main hero continued his story. Over time, medicine took a step forward, and knowledge about Blood became outdated. Now, they say, he barely makes ends meet on the outskirts of the capital and treats the poor almost for free. Hearing this, Ralph even darkened. He clearly believed that such a disrespectful doctor would not meet his expectations and would not be able to help, while Chris, as always practical, immediately saw an opportunity here. Finally, everything fell into place. The young mage understood why Ralph was behaving that way. Chris continued speaking. He blurted out important news. A healer is urgently needed in the capital, but immediately warned he himself will not go there, because he reminded Gesta and Ralph that his brother Klaus is also there, and a chance meeting with him could turn out to be very dangerous for him. Then he asked Gesta if she could go with Ralph to the capital to settle inheritance matters with the relatives. He promised to cover all expenses, and Gesta immediately understood what this was about. The next day they said goodbye with heavy hearts. The group set off for the capital, and the main character went to take care of his important matters. He returned to the church to test his skills, and noticing a familiar sign, was sure he was not mistaken. After many visits to the church to check his status, he finally learned to clearly distinguish the plants that increased his attributes, and now his experience became organized. After his group headed to the capital, Chris went to the Beisha forest with one clear goal: to collect two main types of poisonous plants and look for new ones medicinal or dangerous. The first plant that Chris was looking for turned out to be a grass with small purple flowers, and Chris knew for sure it increases endurance. Previous experiments had already confirmed this. Chris suddenly remembered how he first came across this plant near the body of a monster during his first trip to the Beisha forest. It looked safe and non-poisonous, but the tracks showed the monster died right after eating it. The second target was a mushroom that looked frighteningly poisonous, and Chris confirmed, if eaten, the body's resistance increases despite its unpleasant appearance. He had already found several plants that increased attributes, but there was still one left. This one interested him the most. This plant was supposed to increase strength. He noticed that there were still many unknown plants here. He decided that it was time to think about a new camp. Something about this place made him uneasy. There were no traces of people, animals, or monsters around, and this unnatural silence made him stay for now in the usual place. The main character clearly knew what was most important for him. First of all, he needed to find two plants that had already proven to increase his attributes. Everything else could wait, so he decisively headed into the forest. Chris carefully walked through the Beisha forest and collected poisonous plants, trying not to uproot them all in a row so as not to destroy the population. At the same time, he carefully recorded every place where they grew and collected as many samples as possible for his experiments. It occurred to him maybe he could grow these plants on his own, but he lives in a dormitory, so that's not an option. Renting a garden bed would be possible, but he immediately rejected that idea. Too risky. The traveler with a small amount of money sadly admitted that this now seemed like a distant dream and came to the inevitable conclusion. To realize his plans, he needed to buy his own house where everything could be done secretly. In the boy's thoughts grew a heavy list of expenses: treatment for Ralph's leg, magical books for Gesta, payment for determining the properties of plants, and he needed not only to pay for all this, but also to save money to buy a house. Wherever Chris looked and whatever he did, money was never enough, and in despair he thought that he urgently needed a way to earn quickly and effectively to get out of this financial pit. That evening, preparing dinner from mushrooms he had gathered in the game, Chris happily noticed that the stew was already ready. He smiled and poured it into a bowl. Genpei mushrooms were tasty on their own, so he simply threw them into the stew without any sophistication. The cooking became much simpler, but another problem appeared. Remembering Gesta's story, Chris pondered how rapidly herbs' popularity was growing. The girl explained to him that it could be wrapped in film and swallowed without even tasting it. It seemed to be some new product on the market. Its feature was that it allowed even the most bitter mixtures to be swallowed easily, and the unpleasant taste disappeared as if it never existed. Thanks to this, he could finally eat any poisonous plants and did not feel that terrible bitterness. The idea was simple: wrap the bitter plant in film and swallow it. He was happy because now he could eat without suffering. The traveler felt with surprise. Today, for the first time, he was able to eat one of the most bitter poisonous plants, and all thanks to the film. Strangely, the bitterness was not felt at all, and the taste even seemed pleasant to him. On the fifth day in the forest, the gathering went wonderfully. During the expedition, we found 20 new species similar to poisonous ones, and most importantly, at least one of them turned out to be of increased potency. Suddenly he froze. He heard the same sound that had already been talked about. During all the time in the forest, the hero had never heard anything like it. He even thought it was just a rumor. A great shadow covered him. Chris did not even move, covering his mouth with his hand, and remained silent. A huge animal on strong, massive legs passed by. It was a huge monster with incredibly large paws. The boy strained to remember the name of this creature, feeling its ancient and dangerous power. Finally, memory flashed. It was the Lord of the Forest, the Diculus. Diculus, a creature that perceives everything seen as prey. As soon as you enter its field of vision, it will rush to hunt you and will not stop until it catches you. Suddenly he notices something and rushes to the tree. This creature is so strong that with one blow it knocks him down. The traveler froze in thought and despairingly noticed that everything was going well, so he could not understand why suddenly everything became a disaster. He quietly cursed to himself, realizing the mortal danger. Fear gripped him, but there was no time. He had to act first. The hero realized a terrible but inevitable conclusion. Escaping from the enemy would not work, so he would have to attack himself, the only chance to face danger head-on. While the Diculus approaches, he suddenly jumps up and strikes from above. Chris scanned the battlefield with his eyes earlier. He had calculated that a strike from above with the full force of gravity would cause the most damage. He stood over the monster in the perfect position for such a strike, but it did not even flinch. With one light movement of its paw, it threw the young man straight into the tree, and although the main hero managed to raise his sword in defense, he still received a strong blow. In the next moment, the Diculus rushed at the hero, ready to strike. The hero froze from pain and surprise. The only thing he could do was to somewhat hold back the monster's jaws, holding a sword in front of him and not letting the teeth reach him. Waiting for the right moment, Chris suddenly pulled out poisonous plants and threw them straight into the Diaculus's mouth. Clenching the sword in his hand, Chris quietly prayed that the poison would work. He knew well, if it did not take this mighty creature, he would not survive, and everything was decided at this moment. Seeing how the poison works, he instantly understood it is still working, but the monster is still alive, so he must not relax. After the strike, Chris said that Diaculus's temporary immobility seemed like a perfect opportunity for the final blow, but immediately admitted that he himself was not in the best shape now. The strike threw him back, and every movement was painful. Realizing that his own life was more important than anything, the main character took out a bottle of healing potion, drank it, and moved on. Pushing himself to the limit, Chris focused on finishing the fight and decided to deliver the decisive blow right now, before the monster could recover and fight back. The young man with a determined look stood, tightly gripping the sword in his hand, while the Diaculus looked at him fiercely. Both were wounded, but neither was going to give up. Without wasting a minute, the hero rushed into the attack. Noticing the movement, the giant creature instantly rushed in that direction. Diaculus approaches and slaps with his paw, creating a wave of air behind him. The hero jumps aside, his hand tense in the bag, is preparing to attack. He waited for the right moment and he strikes. When he struck, the movement felt strange and suddenly it turned out. The sword could not withstand such force and broke. It was already too late to grab anything. A large paw loomed over Chris. At that very moment, the giant creature fainted. The poison took effect, and the air around trembled from the rumble of its fall. The main hero could not believe his eyes. He found himself on the edge of life and death, and from shock even sat down. Chris exhaled and thought that this was the end. Late in the evening, the main hero stepped over the threshold and said that he had returned. Gesta was already inside. She had also returned, just a little earlier than the traveler. Next to him sat Ralph. The young mage was about to greet him, but seeing the state he was in, immediately stopped. Ralph anxiously asked what had happened, because Chris was covered in mud. Chris explained that he had defeated the monster, but was afraid that other monsters would come because of the noise, so he quickly ran back and did not have time to clean up. Stunned by what she saw, the girl asked if he was injured, and Chris replied that his body hurt a little, but nothing serious. Ralph, full of horror and anxiety, asked if Chris had called him some terrible monster, and decided that it was better not to step into such a forest anymore. Chris calmly said, "I definitely dealt with him, so I'm going back there." Suddenly, Ralph was gripped by fear after Chris's story about the encounter with the monster. He sharply grabbed Chris by the shoulder and anxiously said that he should not even think about death under any circumstances, and Chris replied that he did not think about such things. Then he skillfully handed the knight several shashliks, offered to eat, and he immediately calmed down. The main hero admitted that sometimes it was not easy with Ralph, but overall it was easy to get along with him, and that was wonderful. Chris shifted his gaze and, with a slight smile, politely asked the girl how she was doing. The guest briefly replied that she had managed to find Mr. Blood and talk to him. Gesta continued the story and explained that Blad lived in the so-called black market of the capital, and according to her, he had serious financial problems. Gesta detailed the negotiations. At first, Blad asked for a crazy 15 platinum coins for the operation, but Gesta stood his ground and firmly refused to accept such terms, and in the end they agreed on 5 coins. When Ralph heard the final price, he jumped for joy. His face lit up with hope and happiness, and he exclaimed that 5 platinum coins was exactly the amount that finally gave them a real chance to pay for the treatment. But Gesta was still uncertain and anxious. She admitted that even 5 platinum coins was a huge sum for her, and anxiously asked Ralph if he was really sure that such a price was normal. Chris quietly smiled and confirmed that this was exactly the amount he expected, explaining that from the very beginning, when he decided to assemble the team, he dreamed of raising enough money for Ralph's leg treatment. That was his main goal. The main heroine firmly added that she also needed to learn magic at all costs. It was just as important for the future and strength of their team as healing Ralph. Stammering slightly, she sincerely thanked the traveler and addressed him with respect, as to an elder. Chris was a bit surprised by such formality, gently reminded that they are peers and play on the same team, so he suggested communicating more simply without unnecessary politeness and formalities. The girl calmly and confidently responded to Chris's suggestion to speak less formalish, found it more comfortable to communicate politely, and the warrior, noticing this, added that he did not object. Ralph tried to say something about Chris's journey to the forest, but he was immediately told, "Finish eating first, then speak clearly and understandably." After everything they had been through, the knight turned to Chris, reminded him that defeating the monster was not everything, and asked how he was doing with the task and what he had found there. Chris began to explain. His nerves were visible. He was caught off guard just as he was about to leave the forest, so he couldn't finish gathering as planned. But even so, Chris stuffed 2 whole bags. It was a whole mountain of books. The knight exclaimed, a little surprised and enviously, that the leader was already stronger than them, and now the gap would become even bigger, and his voice showed both admiration and slight irritation. The main character replied that if he didn't become stronger, he wouldn't be able to earn enough money to buy everything they needed. Ralph somewhat excused himself, saying it was morally difficult, but it didn't bother him. Chris froze at the edge of the desert plain and carefully looked around. He quietly muttered that this was probably the very place he was looking for, checking if it matched the guest's description. Having confirmed the correctness of his goal, the group leader decisively announced that his task was to find the missing expert, and that from today he was fully returning to adventures after a period of herb gathering. Recalling the first advice, the warrior guessed that the best place to hunt the bullfrog was on the eastern plain. There were almost no monsters there, but many other hunters. The main character showed that the plain was located beyond the old road to the northwest. This was exactly the place the young girl recommended, because it was very close. Chris noticed one important feature of this place. Almost no one went there, so there was practically no reliable information about encounters or victories over these monsters, and this only increased the risk of his plan. And so, making his way between the stones, he finally saw what he was looking for. The bullhead seemed like an ordinary bull, but had one feature: large wings. He breathed heavily, as if sniffing something. The boy muttered to himself that everything completely matches the description, and with lively interest noted exactly, "This is the lost bull preparing for the encounter." The warrior suddenly remembered everything he knew about this monster. He had not yet dared to taste the meat of the bicataxa, but had heard that it is eaten and even sold at the market. The main feature: the monster has wings. Although it cannot fly, at most it can jump a little higher. Prius warned himself that underestimating this creature could be deadly dangerous, so he began to carefully analyze the animal's behavior. If you keep your distance, the bull spot immediately switches to a quick attack, using its horns. Chris considered the options: approach closer, watch the strikes carefully and dodge in time, or keep a distance and strike from afar to avoid the attack. He compared both strategies. Choosing the first strategy, he, like a shadow, cautiously sneaked into its blind spot. He approached closer and precisely struck the leg. Then he grabbed something resembling a hammer and hit it right on the skull. The traveler suddenly recalled an important warning: if you kill the bullfrog incorrectly, its meat sharply decreases in value, so he stunned it with the hammer. Because of this, he carefully disassembled his prey. Standing over the huge carcass of the monster, the warrior scratched the back of his head and froze in surprise, muttering to himself how he would take it all alone. The weight was too great for one person, and the task required taking only the tenderloin, tongue, and fillet. Chris, having thought of nothing, picked up the whole carcass and headed to the service entrance of the butcher's shop. The butcher greeted him, wanted to say that the entrance was on the other side, but suddenly fell silent upon seeing the main character. The leader calmly explained that it was a pity to just throw away the bull, so he decided to take the whole carcass with him. The butcher examined the carcass and froze. The blood was properly drained, the entrails were carefully removed, so the meat remained fresh, and he could not hide his surprise. He confessed, probably, this is the most beautiful bullfinch he has ever seen. The seller was increasingly impressed by their skill. He had never before seen such skilled people among adventurers. Chris asked if they would buy the meat for a good price. The butcher nodded to the adventurer and assured him that he would get a solid sum for the carcass. He called his assistant Nathaniel and told him to wait while he himself would dissect the carcass, then ordered to bring a towel so the traveler could wipe himself, and to fry some meat for him. It was to be his reward for help. He said that now he would start dissecting the carcass and evaluating it, then he would call, so for now he suggested eating the meat and waiting. In the end, the butcher gave 5 gold coins instead of the promised 3, and also treated the hero to meat, and this noticeably lifted his spirits. Chris continued the calculations and noticed that he was paid more than 12 times the amount for a usual bronze task, for which they give 4 silver coins. Looking at the 5 newly received gold coins and enjoying the free food, the group leader confidently thought that if everything continued so well, very soon he would collect the sum he needed for his goals.